A CD Projekt Red affiliated company is releasing a Witcher geocaching mobile game where you slay monsters and complete quests. On an unrelated note, I'm making a Witcher game in real life because I have nothing better to do. The Witcher Monster Slayer takes your phone and allows you to fight monsters with your finger. To build my game in the same vein, I can make some phone app, AR, VR game, or whatever else, but that's boring. My game will be played in real life with real-world peripherals. Put simply, I'll build a sword, a monster, slap some code between them, and call that the game. Moving over to the game mechanics. In The Witcher 3, a Witcher's basic combat kit is comprised of a strong swing, a fast swing, a parry, a dodge, and a roll. Do I have nerve damage? Both sword swings can be replaced with a spectrum of sword swings, tracked to the speed of the sword. The faster you swing, the more damage you do. For parries, if I swing the sword above some speed threshold, but am not hitting the monster, this will be considered a parry action. If I time it with the monster attack, I can deflect it. Dodges and rolls are practically impossible to track based off of how I plan to build the monster, so I'm just going to remove them from my game. I'm perfectly capable of dodging and rolling, but the technology to track it just isn't there. Speed. For the monster, most of the same will apply, except it'll all be automated, and it can't move yet. To accomplish all of that, I'm going to have to use a bunch of Raspberry Pi Zeros. Wrong side. The crux of this project is for the ability for these Pis to communicate with each other. Since they already have Wi-Fi built in, all I need is a router in order to traffic data in between them. So I'll just turn one of the Pis into a router, and then they'll all connect to that, and they could communicate with each other. I'm going to need something to hold all these components together, because normally projects like these use 3D printers, but I do not own a 3D printer. Luckily for me, the local library does have a 3D print request option. So I modeled something up, submitted it, and then realized that there's a 1-week turnaround for each object that you submit. So now I own a 3D printer. Next up, the sword, which is going to be a little bit difficult, because canonically Geralt's sword is 40 inches long, which rules out Mr. Medieval Times over here.
Hej, to moja miotła?
Would you know if you have like wooden brooms or something?
Check, 38.
48, awesome. Thank you, sir. This isn't stable. Mount. The accelerometer needs to be at the tip with the wires running down to the guard where the Pi and battery will be. Using the values written by the accelerometer, I could compute the acceleration value that will be used going forward. All swings start with a sharp increase in acceleration, followed by a slight decline as the player goes to the apex of the swing. Once through that apex, the acceleration spikes again, indicating the player is slowing down the speed of the sword to reach a stable state. The curve is an approximation of the actual curve, as I have to limit how many times I pull that accelerometer. I can carry the occurrence of each spike forward through a few polling periods by introducing a moving average, which is the average of the current acceleration and the previous x retrieved values. By varying x, I could widen the spikes such that the two spikes practically merge, thus allowing me to set a threshold to indicate when to classify acceleration values as a swing or not. In the second version of the sword, I made sure everything was held down by screws. I also threw on a speaker so I could play sound effects. The Witcher world has a wide variety of monsters that I could choose from, but I want to hone in on a specific type of monster. Burrowing monsters, like the Archaeospore and the giant centipede from the Blood and Wine expansion. This lets me bypass building a robot car to chase me around as the monster. Instead, I just build a few nodes to represent the burrowing points for the monster, and it's just gonna hop in between those nodes and attack me. Each node will have to know whether I am in range of it, whether I hit it, and a way to represent its game status. The node status can be represented through one of these LED matrices, and I could play sound through a speaker just like I have in my sword to have the monster interact with me a little bit, bring some life to the game. But the human and hit detection introduces a problem. As you may have seen, I had GPS components built out for the router and planned on using it to keep track of the location of all the other game components as well. The GPS can't really be used for proximity sensing, as it sucks. But there is something that I can use that will help me do proximity and hit sensing. Light. What we perceive as light is a range of wavelengths on the electromagnetic spectrum. This spectrum goes from probably won't kill you to definitely will kill you. Just above the visual light spectrum, there's a band of waves called infrared. This grouping of waves is massive and has vastly different uses depending on which wavelength you use. For example, using near infrared, which has similar properties to visual light, I could transmit and receive signals without it being seen by the human eye. Moving up the spectrum to far infrared, these waves are naturally emitted by humans as a part of our body heat. Pairing that with a passive infrared sensor, I can now detect a person within range of each monster node. So I slapped this IR emitting ring on the sword with enough exposed wire and electrical tape to insert joke here. So now when I swing, it's going to emit infrared light and try to connect with the monster's receiver to inform it that, hey, I'm swinging above you. With that out of the way, I'm now contractually obligated to show you a build montage. Now I need 2 more nodes to have a functional burrowing monster. Yay. With the hardware assembled for each of the 3 monster nodes, I now have to inject the code needed to manage the monster. The LED matrix and speaker will be used to represent the game state to the player. Sound to indicate when it is performing an action, or when it has an action done upon it. The matrix is an 8x8, and will display its health in the central 6x6 if the monster isn't performing an action. The outside trim will be used to represent the stun state of the monster, starting with a full trim until it winds down to nothing, indicating the monster is no longer stunned. The monster begins with 2 actions that it can take. A strong attack, which does more damage, and a fast attack that hits quicker. Should an attack be parried by a player timely swinging their sword, the monster will be briefly stunned and not be able to perform an action for a little bit, leaving it vulnerable to attacks. The monster's hits are quite punishing, so making sure that the player lands parries is crucial when fighting. However, when parrying a strong attack, a little bit of the monster's attack damage bleeds through, which puts a timer on the player even if they perfectly parry each attack. Once the monster gets below an HP threshold, it unlocks the ability to burrow itself to another node, forcing the player to possibly move around the battlefield. If the HP gets even lower, the monster can enter a defensive stance. This stance makes it invulnerable and gives it the ability to bounce back damage to the player if hit, but the invulnerability has a limit. If the player is able to beat through the armor before the monster exits this state, the monster will be stunned and open for free attacks. The player needs to drop the monster's HP down to 0 before their own health reaches 0 to win the game. This is really cold. With everything complete, all that there's left to do is to test it. I got the sword, I got a node over there, a node over there, and a node over there. They're raised a little bit because the infrared is not connecting that well. If it's too far away, we'll talk about that later. But it works. Programming things. Beep, boop, boop. I am IR. Come at me. Do it. Do it. Ah. Probably too close for this. Yeah, there we go. Jesus, I may have put way too much armor. Yeah, I'm not gonna try that. Look at this. I'll try. Brain farted there. Oh. You think you could beat me at my own game? Yeah, it did. I'm gonna try the same settings, but we're gonna play better and see if we could break a defensive stance. And so we begin. Gotta beware for the spiky pit of death. Yeah, we'll try. Go, tie. Oh, come on. Die. Do something, come on. Damn it. That's even... Oh, do it. No, come on, trigger. Capture. Oh.
Perwa.
You're there now. Okay. Well, it's possible, I swear. I'm single. That was a journey. I didn't know where I was going when I wrote down sword that detects monster back in September. But here we are. There's still a lot of flaws with this. As you may have seen, this isn't really emitting enough IR where it's not bouncing correctly, which made the whole entire game a lot harder than it needs to be. I also need to fix the motion sensor because, as you saw, I'm not enough of a hot boy for it to detect me. Also probably because I am in layers upon layers because it's very cold. If you made it this far, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Who are you?
Looks like my time here is up. Take care, folks.
Wait, no. Get back.